So I've had the extreme displeasure of trying to wade through a Thor Skywalker video. Now, I may be changing several things about the channel, but I want to keep the Dark Thor moniker, perhaps permanently, because I do admire Thor as a mythical archetype. So all I can say is I'm ashamed he's putting shame to the name of Thor, but that's his problem, not my problem. So we have the great so-called Menace Sue debate, and shocker! Rey turns out to be guilty, but not Anakin, and not even Luke. He just cuts Luke out of his quote analysis. But he's going to explain why.
Overall, this is a story of how one so pure and good, so well intended, can fall so far. We're also told early on that Anakin is the chosen one, that if he just follows the right path, he will bring balance to the Force, which, in theory, further makes his eventual fall to the dark side even worse, since he could have brought about so much good. Basically, everything about Anakin's story is set up to be a tragedy, not only for himself, but for everyone else around him, and for the whole damn galaxy, actually. And to sort of paraphrase Dooku here, the higher the start, the greater the fall, or the greater the tragedy will feel at the end. So when he's a child winning pod races and blowing up droid control ships accidentally, we're supposed to eventually look back at that and lament what might have been.
So he's okay with the abilities issue. So, okay, we can't really say Rey is a Mare because of abilities, but hey, she always does the right thing. First, that's not true. That's actually not true at all within these films. We'll put that aside. She is actually tempted. This is a whole scene with her and Kylo.
And so her greatest self-serving decision is also self-sacrificing in a way.
A few moments ago.
Anyway, though she maybe doesn't qualify as a Mary Sue in that respect, again, her power is explained. The fact that she's never tempted by all that power could make her one.
I love you.
Liar! Liar! Liar!
But whatever. But he is correct that ultimately she always does the right thing. They always ultimately do the right thing. Anakin ultimately did the right thing. Luke ultimately did the right thing. We know that. We already knew that already. He didn't say anything. But let's try to be generous and go through what he says in the video.
Expect, whether we're consciously aware of it or not, a hero's journey when it comes to Star Wars. We expect to have main characters in these stories that we can empathize with, more so than having one we can live vicariously through and feel empowered by.
No point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber.
Okay, so your analysis is, well, whether we like it or not, in the Star Wars, we need a hero's journey. And your problem with Rey is, my problem with Rey here is she did something heroic. Well, when you're a hero, you know what you're expected to do? You're expected to do something heroic. Because, when you do the hero's journey, the hero, they act heroically. Because heroes, by definition, are heroic. So Rey is bad character because, she's awfully heroic. But you just told us, you literally just said in a Star Wars story, the main character needs to conform to the hero's journey. And if Rey is the main character, guess what? You said it yourself. The expectation is she needs to act heroically. And your problem with her is she acts heroically. So, A, you're either extraordinarily stupid, or B, you're a raging sexist because you provided no logical reason except her gender why Rey's a bad character. You literally have said only, she acted heroically. Right, you yourself saying as an assumption, the people in Star Wars who are the main characters have to act heroically. So logically, you have only provided one reason you hate Rey, because she's a woman. That's what you did with that. But let's go even further, because he just doesn't stop at being a raging moron and sexist. Apparently, he doesn't even know Star Wars at the basic level and actually lies to his audience.
We know Anakin will become Darth Vader by the end of the prequels, but with Rey, we have no idea, or had no idea when it started, where her story is going, what will happen to her, or what she'll become for good or evil. And this will of course greatly affect how these two characters are written or should be written. And for George Lucas, he had the luxury, or challenge you could say, of knowing exactly where the character of Anakin was going to end up from the very start, and then he had to try to make that story interesting. It's also worth noting he was the sole writer of that story as well. He had complete control over the prequels. And though maybe it was
It's a little disjointed.
Seems like a lot of short scenes.
It's bold in terms of jerking people around, but I may have gone too far in a few places.
You know, folks, we need to keep in mind, whatever else, George Lucas wrote the Star Wars. Well, I do believe Star Wars has other writers credited in the story besides George Lucas. But let's be generous. Let's actually not do what he does, which is do stupid, mindless, garbage propaganda for money. I am doing stuff for money, no doubt about that, but not propaganda. So let's be extremely generous. He probably meant the prequels, not the original trilogy. Obviously, the original trilogy even had other writers working on the script, but he did, to be fair to George, he actually paid for them. That's being fair-minded. But clearly he's lying about the original trilogy. But being fair-minded, he doesn't mean the original trilogy. He meant the prequels. But the problem with that would be Attack of the Clones has a co-writer. I want to repeat that. Attack of the Clones has a co-writer. That's not something we can dispute. This is not an interpretation of the films. This is a basic fact of the production. He had a co-writer. He had a co-writer. So if you say George Lucas was the sole writer of the prequels, that is not true. That is a lie. That is an empirical fact. He had a co-writer for one of the films. That's not something we can argue about. In fact, it's a well-known secret. Lucas hired many writers for the prequels and used their work but didn't give them credit. But to be fair to him, that's an unverified rumor. It's probably true, but legally, empirically, reality-wise, we can only say he had one co-writer for Attack of the Clones. And it's nice you have a little bit of gaslighting saying, but hey, folks, he controlled the production. That's true. That is true. But here's the problem. You can have complete control of the production. You would still have a writer you have to work with. If you use a substantive amount of work from another writer, you have to give them credit or you're going to have a lawsuit on your hands. That's just how things go. So 3 things. 1, you're a sexist. 2, you're just extremely stupid, don't even know your own video and made incoherent arguments. And number 3, you don't even know basic facts about the prequels. And guess what he's talking about throughout most of this video? The prequels. So who are you? Well, you're a lying, sexist, hypocritical monster and a complete fucking idiot. You couldn't even double check that. He didn't write all of the prequels. He didn't. That's an empirical fact. He had help with the writing. So who is Thor Skywalker? A piece of shit. Well, I'm also a Thor, but I'd have to say, overall, I'm the better Thor.
This defense will include pointing at other characters, usually Anakin and or Luke, though in this case I'll only be discussing Anakin, and saying they're an action hero from the days of old, or just a straight up superhero, fighting for truth and justice just because it's the right thing to do.